Alright, here goes. I guess I'm writing this more for myself than anyone else, trying to make sense of the mess my life has become. My wife, Emily, and I have been together for 8 years, married for 5. We met through mutual friends, hit it off right away, and built what I thought was a strong foundation. We've had our ups and downs, but we've always managed to push through, at least, that's what I believed. I work as an engineer, and Emily has a job in marketing, so we've always had demanding schedules. But recently, something's been off. At first, it was subtle. She started coming home later than usual, saying she had work dinners, or needed to stay at the office to meet deadlines. She'd been distant, not as affectionate, and seemed more interested in her phone than in spending time together. I tried brushing it off as stress from work, or just one of those phases people go through. But then, her excuses started piling up, and it got harder to ignore the red flags. She'd started going to the gym out of nowhere, which, okay, isn't a bad thing by itself. But she's never been a fitness enthusiast. Emily went from 0 to gym rat overnight, and she wouldn't let me join her, said it was her time to de-stress. Then, she started getting secretive about her phone. She'd always had her phone lying around, but now she'd keep it on her, even taking it into the bathroom. I know I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions, but you know when something just doesn't feel right? I kept telling myself I was overthinking it, but there was this gut feeling I couldn't shake. I couldn't keep ignoring that gut feeling. The secrecy, the constant texting, the late nights at work. It all started piling up, and I felt like I was losing my mind. I wasn't sleeping well, constantly replaying scenarios in my head, wondering if I was just being paranoid or if something was actually going on. But there's only so much self-doubt you can handle before you need answers. One night, she got home later than usual, saying she had to help a work friend with some project. She didn't realize I'd already called her office earlier, just to see if she'd be late and maybe surprise her with dinner. The receptionist casually mentioned Emily had left hours before. I didn't bring it up right away, but that was it, my last straw. The next day, I took a sick day from work. I couldn't focus, couldn't think straight, and I just needed to figure this out. I checked our phone bill and saw tons of texts and calls to one specific number. My heart sank. I didn't recognize the number, so I saved it in my phone and, on a whim, dialed it from a private number. A man answered. I froze. I didn't know what to say, so I hung up immediately. But that was enough. I knew something was happening, and I needed to know exactly what it was. That evening, I was ready. My heart was pounding, and my mind raced with every possible scenario of how this would play out. When Emily got home, I tried to keep my cool. She barely looked at me as she walked in, her usual distracted self, texting on her phone. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to talk. She looked up, eyes narrowed. What's up? I took a deep breath. I know you've been lying to me. She blinked, a flicker of something crossing her face before she quickly masked it. What are you talking about? I haven't lied to you about anything. Oh, really? I pulled up the phone records I'd saved on my phone. I called your office yesterday. They said you left hours before you claimed you did. And what's with all the calls and texts to this number? Who is he, Emily? She laughed, actually laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're spying on me now? Jesus, Matt, you're being ridiculous. Her tone shifted, defensive and cold. It's just a friend. Someone I've been helping out, and you're making a big deal out of nothing. A friend? I could barely contain the anger in my voice. Then why haven't you introduced me? Why are you so secretive about your phone? And why does he pick up if I call? She scoffed, crossing her arms. Because I knew you'd freak out and accuse me of cheating, just like you're doing now. I was speechless. She was twisting everything, making me feel like I was the one going insane. But I couldn't let her turn this around on me. Are you sleeping with him, Emily? She rolled her eyes, as if I was the one wasting her time. Unbelievable. You're seriously accusing me of this? God, Matt, you don't get it. I'm not the one who's gone stale here. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't need other people to talk to. Her words hit me like a slap in the face that I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Her words stung, but it was the sheer betrayal behind them that cut deeper. I had spent years building a life with this woman, and now she was deflecting my pain and anger back at me. Is this really how you want to play this? I asked, my voice shaky. By making me the villain in your story? You're the one who's been sneaking around. Emily shrugged, that familiar bitchish smirk reappearing on her face. I'm just saying maybe if you were a better husband, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere for support. I felt rage boiling inside me, but underneath that anger was a deep, gnawing sadness. All those moments we'd shared, the laughter, the love, it was like a facade crumbling around me. I wanted to scream, to make her see how ridiculous her excuses were, but I was still processing the pain of realizing that the person I trusted most had shattered my world. I took a step back, trying to gather my thoughts. You're really going to stand there and defend this? You're cheating on me, and instead of owning it, you're throwing it back in my face? I can't believe you'd stoop this low. Her expression shifted momentarily, revealing a flicker of guilt, but she quickly masked it with annoyance. I'm not cheating. You're just jealous because you can't handle that I've found someone who actually appreciates me. It's not my fault you've been so wrapped up in your work. I wanted to scream, to shake her until she understood the gravity of her betrayal. Instead, I felt my shoulders slump under the weight of it all. I had loved this woman, believed in her, and she was throwing it all away like it meant nothing. As the confrontation spiraled, I couldn't help but think about how we got here. I thought about the little moments, the late-night conversations, the plans we made. They all seemed so trivial now. I felt like a fool for believing that our marriage was solid, for trusting her implicitly. But then there was anger. Anger at her for lying, for using my love as a weapon against me. Anger at myself for not seeing the signs sooner. Maybe you should just go, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. I was exhausted, defeated, and I could feel the tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. I don't know if I can do this anymore. Emily crossed her arms defiantly. Fine, I'll go. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've lost. And with that, she turned on her heel, storming out of the room, leaving me alone in the remnants of our shattered life together. I sank onto the couch, the reality of my situation crashing down around me like a tidal wave. After that night, I was a wreck. I spent hours just sitting in the dark, staring at the walls, wondering how things had gone so wrong. The anger I had felt during the confrontation faded, replaced by a deep sadness and a sense of betrayal that was almost suffocating. I replayed our arguments over and over in my head, trying to find a glimmer of hope or a sign that things could be fixed. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just a bump in the road. It was a massive cliff I had been pushed off. Emily didn't come home that night. I knew she'd probably gone to her friend, and honestly, I was sickened by the thought of it. I spent the next couple of days in a haze, going through the motions at work and avoiding friends who might ask me how things were going. I was angry, devastated, and lost all at once. But I also realized that I couldn't let this define me. I didn't want to be the guy who sat around crying over a cheating wife. I had to reclaim my life. The first step was clear. I needed to confront reality and make a decision. I spent the next few days focusing on myself, going to the gym, eating right, and doing things that made me happy. It felt liberating, almost like I was shedding the weight of my old life. I had been living in Emily's shadow for too long, accommodating her needs and ignoring my own. Finally, I made the decision. I was done. I couldn't trust her anymore, and that trust was essential for any relationship to survive. I called a divorce lawyer to get the ball rolling. It felt surreal, but also empowering. I wasn't going to fight for someone who didn't fight for me. When Emily eventually came home, I was ready. She walked in, and I could tell she expected the same old me, angry and heartbroken. But this time, there was a quiet confidence in my demeanor. Emily, we need to talk, I said firmly. She rolled her eyes. What now? More accusations? No, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm filing for divorce. Her face fell, and for the first time, I saw a hint of fear in her eyes. You're being ridiculous. You can't just throw everything away because you're mad. This isn't about being mad. This is about your betrayal. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as I declared my independence from the chaos she had brought into my life. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Filing for divorce was like opening a floodgate. It unleashed all the feelings I had kept bottled up inside. I felt relief, but also sadness for what I was losing. The life we had built together, the dreams we had shared, all felt like they were slipping through my fingers like sand. But as time went on, I began to see the silver lining. I started reconnecting with friends I had neglected, diving back into hobbies I loved, and discovering who I was outside of my marriage. I took long bike rides to clear my head, spending hours lost in thought as I pedaled through the familiar streets of my neighborhood. It felt like I was reclaiming pieces of myself I had given up over the years. Emily tried to reach out, sending texts filled with guilt and anger, but I remained resolute. She couldn't manipulate me anymore. I had seen the worst of her, and there was no way I was going back to that life of uncertainty and lies. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone who had chosen betrayal over honesty. Reflecting on this painful experience, I learned a lot about trust, self-worth, and resilience. I realized that I had allowed myself to be treated poorly for too long, prioritizing her happiness over my own. This whole situation taught me that a relationship should be a partnership based on mutual respect and support, not a battleground of lies and deception. For anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, my advice is this: trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't be afraid to confront the truth, no matter how painful it may be. Your happiness and peace of mind are worth fighting for, even if that fight means walking away from someone you once thought was your everything. I emerged from this experience scarred but stronger. While I didn't expect to be single again at my age, I was ready for whatever came next. The road ahead would be uncertain, but it would also be mine, free from the weight of betrayal and full of possibilities. Just when I thought I had started to piece my life back together, an unexpected twist emerged that turned everything I believed upside down. It was a typical Thursday evening, and I was in the midst of preparing dinner when I received a call from my sister, Rachel. She sounded frantic. "Matt, you need to come over. Something's happened with Emily, and it's bad," she said, her voice tinged with panic. "What do you mean? Is she okay?" I asked, my heart racing. All sorts of worst-case scenarios flooded my mind. "I think you should just come. I can't explain it over the phone. Just get here." I didn't waste any time. I jumped in my car and drove over to her place, my stomach twisting with anxiety. As I arrived, I could see Rachel pacing in her living room, her eyes wide with concern. "Rachel, what's going on?" I demanded as soon as I stepped inside. "Emily got into a car accident. She's at the hospital," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. My heart dropped. Despite everything that had happened, a part of me still cared for her. I immediately felt a rush of conflicting emotions, anger at her betrayal, but also a deep concern for her well-being. "What happened?" I pressed. "They said it was a hit and run. She's conscious but pretty banged up. They're running tests to make sure everything's okay," Rachel explained. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Here I was, prepared to move on, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I should be there for her. I agreed to go to the hospital with Rachel, my heart pounding the entire drive. Once we arrived, I found Emily lying in a hospital bed, her arm in a sling and bruises decorating her face. She looked so fragile and vulnerable in that moment, and it struck a chord deep within me. I was flooded with memories of our time together, the love we had shared, and even the pain of her betrayal felt muted in the face of her suffering. She looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to apprehension when she saw me. "Matt," she whispered, a mix of relief and fear in her eyes. I stood frozen for a moment, caught off guard by the sight of her. "What happened?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily sighed, her voice trembling. "I was on my way home from work, and I don't remember much. I think I must have been distracted, and then, it all happened so fast." I sat down beside her, struggling with the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "You shouldn't have been driving so recklessly," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You've been all over the place lately." She winced slightly but then shifted, meeting my gaze. "I know I messed up, Matt. I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't think about how my actions would affect you, and now this, it's just a lot to take in." I looked at her, taken aback. Was she actually feeling remorse? This moment of vulnerability made me question everything again. Could this be a chance for healing, or was it just another act? As the nurse entered the room to check on her, I realized that while this moment was significant, I couldn't forget what had happened between us. The accident didn't erase her betrayal, nor could it absolve her of the pain she had caused. I had to remember my decision, my journey of self-discovery. But part of me couldn't ignore that here was a woman who, despite everything, had once been the love of my life, now vulnerable, human, and in need. The emotional conflict was real, and I had to navigate it carefully. Sitting there beside Emily in that sterile hospital room, I found myself facing the reality of our situation from an entirely different angle. Her vulnerability stirred a mix of sympathy and resentment within me. She had been reckless, yet here she was, fragile and exposed, stripped of the defenses she had built around herself. I wanted to believe that she was genuinely remorseful, but a small voice in the back of my mind reminded me of the lies and deceit that had plagued our relationship. After the nurse left, I took a deep breath, my heart heavy with conflicting emotions. "Emily, I don't know what to say," I finally said. "You've hurt me deeply. I can't just forget that because you've been in an accident." "I know, Matt," she replied, her voice cracking. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I wish I could take it all back. I made horrible choices, and I see that now. I was lost, and I let my selfishness get in the way of everything we built together." I looked at her, feeling that familiar pang of pain from the past, but also a flicker of the love we once shared. "What does that mean for us?" I asked cautiously. "Are you saying you want to try again? Because I need to know if you're serious about changing." She hesitated, biting her lip as if wrestling with her thoughts. "I don't expect you to take me back right now. I just want to focus on healing, both physically and emotionally. But I need to be honest, I want to change. I want to earn back your trust. I know I have a long way to go." As I sat there, watching her struggle to express her feelings, I realized how far I had come since that fateful night when I discovered her betrayal. I had fought through the hurt and anger, reclaiming my self-worth. It was clear that while Emily might be sincere in her desire to change, the question remained whether I was willing to let her back into my life. "Emily," I said slowly, "I want to be fair to both of us. Right now, I'm still healing from everything. I need time to process this. I'm not ready to jump back into anything, but I will support you as you recover. We can take it one day at a time." A wave of relief washed over her features. "Thank you, Matt. That means a lot. I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I can be better." As I left the hospital later that night, I felt a strange mix of hope and caution. I knew that rebuilding trust was a long and arduous journey, but I also recognized that both of us had changed during this turbulent time. Life was unpredictable, and perhaps this unexpected twist could lead us to a healthier, more honest dynamic. In the weeks that followed, I supported Emily through her recovery. We had honest conversations about our past, our mistakes, and what we wanted for the future. It wasn't easy. There were tears, moments of anger, and times when I questioned if I was making the right choice by allowing her back into my life. But gradually, I started to see signs of genuine change in her. Emily attended counseling and began to confront her own issues, the roots of her insecurities that had led to her infidelity. It was a slow process, But I found myself appreciating the small victories, like the way she took responsibility for her actions, how she began to prioritize her health, and the effort she put into being honest with me. As I embarked on this new chapter, I realized that while I was still scarred by the past, I was also open to the idea of moving forward. Healing isn't linear, it's messy and unpredictable. I learned that forgiveness is a choice, and it's one I was willing to consider, but only if I felt secure in the relationship. Through this tumultuous journey, I discovered a renewed sense of self and resilience. The experience taught me about the importance of honesty and communication in relationships, reminding me that love can endure even the deepest wounds if both parties are willing to fight for it. As I stood on the brink of a new beginning, I knew that no matter what happened next, whether we ultimately succeeded in rekindling our love or chose to go our separate ways, I would emerge from this stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever life had in store for me.